Hi everyone. As I spoke before, my name is Stephanie Barcelo, and I am here to dispute the claim by my fellow classmate Max. His affirmative claim that regular fast food consumption leads to obesity. And I'm going to I want to show the lack of credibility in his claims. His claims about macronutrients, quality of the food, and the addiction mentally and physically that these foods cause. Going over his first claim, macronutrients, he says that these meals come complete with an abundant amount of fats, carbohydrates, and properly amounts of protein in the meal. And his evidence towards that is a quote that comes from the Healthy Direct Gov. In most people, obesity is caused by eating too much or moving too little. If you consume high amounts of energy from your diet but do not burn off the energy to exercise physically actively, the surplus energy will be returned to fats. So when he's saying this, it doesn't have a direct correlation with his claim that these abundant amounts of fats in the protein of the meal, like, does that go along with fast food, or does that have to do more with your exercise? And it seems as though he is proving that it has to do with exercise more than the actual fast food. Going into my next claim about his secondary claim, the quality of food. Max goes on to say that the more hands a product moves through, the more chances it has to losing quality and being affected by natural factors such as heat, cold, vibrations, impact, and the human touch. And the evidence he tries to use to justify his claim is that from the CNN, when livestock producers administer antibiotics routinely to their flocks and herds, bacteria can develop resistance, thrive, and even spread to our communities, contributing to the larger problem of antibiotics resistance. And you see a kind of pattern here that, what does that have to do with fast food? What does obesity and fast food have to do with the quality? He's saying that antibiotics and it can cause sickness because of bacteria. Why does that have a correlation with the consumption of fast food leading to obesity? And it doesn't. He goes on to say, using the quote, that more than a quarter of chickens bred intensively for meat have difficulty walking and are crippled by rapid weight gain, sleep deprivation, and cramped conditions, according to a study funded by Britain's Farm Ministry. What does the weight of the chicken and the space of the chicken and the walking ability have to do with obesity and fast food? This can go on to say, well, families at home buy the same chickens, it's the same thing. So are you attacking just fast food areas, or are you attacking all people that buy these chickens? And again, there's no correlation to his claim and his evidence. And finally, to his third claim, the fact that these addictions are mentally and physically, that these from the foods. His third claim is that these addictions to sugar can come from eating habits at home and outside of fast food restaurants. Oh wait, no, that's my claim. I'm just kidding. His claim was, that was his claim, and his evidence towards it is that he goes on to say in his evidence that the behavioral findings with sugar are similar to those observed with drugs and abuse. Rats fed daily intermediate sugar and chow escalates their sugars intake and increase their intake during the first hour daily, access which they define as binge. So yes, there is addiction, I guess, in these foods supposedly, but why is that the fast food's problem? Like, that is in all sugar-free food. That is also fed at home, and it seems like it doesn't have direct correlation with fast food, and it can't be just attacking fast food because a lot of people consume these sugars outside of restaurants. So I think that lacks definitely reliability because these can be intaked at homes, at school, all around besides fast food restaurants. And just to like kind of wrap this all together, I think it is evident that Max did not have credible evidence to go along with his claims, because he goes on to say how obesity is caused because you have too much of this fat and then you don't exercise it off. That has nothing to do with fast food restaurants. That is the own person's fault for not exercising. And then he says the addiction to sugars, that is outside restaurants as well. And I just think there's a pattern of miscorrelation between both evidence and both claims. And thank you guys very
All right. Well, I like the way you went after this. I think especially with the first section where you cite the advocate's own evidence and says you're eating too much and moving too little, and that's the advocate's evidence. And does that suggest that it's fast foods? If people consume too much, where's the data that says most of the food that they consume is fast food, or that they eat more when they go to fast food places than they would at home? We don't have any data like that. That's the way I think you want to phrase that argument. You've got the right point here,
Yeah.
but you need to kind of make a claim too. I mean, I understand the reasoning point that you're making, but you want to be as clear as you can. You want to make the claim, which you do in other places, that says, that simply proves that people get fat because they do two things. They eat too much and they don't move around much.
Yeah.
There's nothing to dispute about that. But you did ask the good question right after that. So how is that linked to fast food? And it's not. And at least not from the advocate's point of view. There's no information that suggests that people consume more fast food than they do any other kind of food, or that they consume more when they eat fast food. I think those are the kinds of presses that you would follow up with to make your argument stronger. But you have the right argument on that particular point. And then the same thing about exercise. What's the exercise got to do with this? This would be a place where some counter evidence would come in really useful.
Yeah.
To suggest that, you know what, we've got a world full of people that don't exercise for all kinds of reasons. They are too busy, they're too lazy, it's expensive, they've got injuries, they've got other responsibilities, that sort of thing. It's great that people can exercise, but 80% of the population doesn't go to the gym on a regular basis. 90% of them would rather watch TV than go out for a walk or any of those kinds of things. And so Max can talk all he wants about fast food, but we know half of the equation is exercise, and that's got nothing to do with McDonald's, that kind of thing. And like I said, I think you've got the right argument to make here and the right reasoning on it. I think your reasoning is really good in a lot of places on this argument. What you need is some evidence to add to the argument to make it work a little bit better. And then the same thing is the whole argument about the quality of the food and the antibiotics and fat chickens and all that stuff. And you're going, and what has this got to do with obesity? How is this related? He didn't And don't be shy about saying, it's a criticism of Max. We're not being personal here. It's just, Max did not explain how, antibiotics in beef has any impact on obesity. He doesn't explain how chickens that are bred to be really fat and have a hard time walking around makes anybody else fat. It's not like, I ate that chicken at home and now I'm going to behave like that chicken. Yeah. It's just chicken, and we're back to the first equation that you cited. It's his evidence that you're citing on that particular point. So I think you've got the right reasoning points here, and like I said, I think you need a little bit more follow through and some additional evidence on that. But that's you've got the right point on that. And then the addictive thing. Here's another one of those places where you've got the right argument and you need to step it up just a little bit more. All right, all kinds of foods have sugar in them. Is there any evidence that fast food has more sugar in it than any place else? Is McDonald's a pusher that's turning us into junkies that crave this kind of stuff? Or is it just all of the food that we consume does that? Processed food may have a lot of sugars in it. Corn syrup is in everything. Here are all these sorts of things. Do we crave sugars and sweets? Maybe that's true. But why is it the responsibility of,
Fast restaurant.
yeah, big, the Burger King, Wendy, and Ronald McDonald to take blame for this when we are all a bunch of sugar addicts?
Yeah.
And we didn't become sugar addicts because of that. You want to blame somebody? Blame Coca-Cola. I don't know, something like that. But pointing the finger in this direction, there's a problem with that. So again, you've got the right argument. You just need to be a little more emphatic about it and find some evidence that backs those things. And some of them are just, you can think about those things.
No, yeah, because I'm kind of going off the debate club. We just it's super fast, so you kind of just go off their evidence and you just attack everything they say.
Yeah, and I didn't
take the time to actually get my own evidence.
Yeah, and that's one of the. Well, you heard me talk about in one of the other speeches. That's a press that you could make. That's the kind of thing that you could say immediately after hearing the previous response. But you guys got 2 weeks to get ready, and so it needs to have a little bit more depth. And when you're in the debate class, for instance, even though you might sometimes have to make those kinds of arguments, it's nice to have some evidence in your files that you can point to and use to respond to the argument too. So that's what we're going to be working on next.